Hi, this is Steve from the Seaside Allotment YouTube channel, and I'm getting lots of questions about how I do my planting plan and what my planting schedule is. And so I thought I would record this little video and show you the 3 tools that I'm using. So let's take a look. So let's take a look at the first tool that I use, and that is a spreadsheet. I just got all of my seed packets out, and I went through and just added each seed packet to the spreadsheet with some basic information like the carrot, variety of little fingers, basic sowing instructions, and some planting dates. The planting dates I'm not so bothered with really, because I'm using another tool to track that. But this is just as a record of the seeds that I've got. Now I could add additional information like when those seeds are going to go out of their sell by, use by dates, but I found that most seeds still work perfectly fine outside the use by date. So when I'm coming to the end or beyond the use by date, I just sow a few extra seeds and it seems to work fine. So there we go. I've got this very long list in a spreadsheet, but that's not too useful for me because I want to achieve 2 additional things. I want to know when to sow the seeds, and I want to have all of my successions planned and that sort of thing. And I also want to have additional information like where I'm going to sow the seeds. And I also want to keep track of everything I've learned basically as I go along. And so for that, I've decided to use Google Calendar, and I'll show you that now. Okay, so this is what Google Calendar looks like, and it's not particularly interesting. For January, I've just completed my first sowing of the year, which is spring onion guardsman, and those are destined for my hotbed. And I've just sowed today actually my super early brassicas, and they're going to go into one of the cold frames initially, and then the lid will be taken off that cold frame, and those brassicas will be as I say, they're super early. They're just going to be grown for leaves. And then sowings that I've made later in the year will take over from the ones that I've sown for leaves. When I sow for leaves, I sow much more densely and much earlier. So anyway, let's just take a quick look at the information I can capture. So if you take a look at this, then I've got obviously the sowing date, but I've also got loads of information in here about onions and how to sow them, how to prepare the soil, how to look after them, when to harvest them, you know, all that sort of thing, nutritional information, as much information basically as I can gather. And what I'm intending to do is to keep on adding information to this. Now you'll also notice that that this is repeating. So I'm sowing on Monday the 1st of January, but the calendar keeps a track and it knows that I'm going to do that every year. And so any information that I store in this calendar entry will appear next year as well. Now there's an added advantage to this in that if the 1st of January proved too early or too late, then I can just adjust this when I figure that out. So it may be that I find out that really the 1st of January was too early for the hotbed sowing, and so I'll move that, say, 2 weeks later, and I might figure that out only in March. So in March, I go back to this entry and update it, and then next year this will appear 2 weeks later. So let's just take a look when things start hotting up, so you can see that you know, there's a lot going on in February, and there's even more going on in March. So there's a lot of stuff to keep track of. In fact, if you look at the 1st of March, there's a lot of stuff being sown, and so this calendar is really, really useful. One of the things I really failed on last year was getting all my successions right, and I just lost track of everything that I needed to do, especially with having to sort out Debbie's plot and Jenny's plot as well. So, I think this is going to really help me, and I just want one place where I can start to build a real repository of all the information that I know about the things that I'm sewing. And I just love the fact that I can invest in building that this year, and it's just there for me next year automatically. Now, I can also search, and let me just do a quick search here for, say, brassica. I'll just search for kale, and you'll see that the standard search is not really that great, because things that are not kale appear in this list. So quite how Google is figuring out what to include, I don't know. Everything that is kale does appear, but lots of things that aren't kale, like peppers and things like that, also seem to appear. So that is not that useful. However, if you click on this drop down, and I get rid of that kale here, and search in my where field, which is the location that I'm actually going to sew things in, I can actually use this field to get a much better search. So if I search for chard here, for example, the only thing that's coming up is chard. Now that, I think, is really useful, because it lets me look right through the year when I'm sewing chard. So I'm sewing it in January, I'm sewing it in April, I'm sewing it in July. Now, let's just take a look at how I did that. So if I do this and I edit this chard entry, then you can see it's because I've used the location field, which is this one here that I'm highlighting, to put the information that I want to search on. So I've got chard in there. Now, I can also use that location field for all sorts of other information. And so, for example, if I go back to my search and use the drop down, and instead of chard here, I'll just put #hotbed. And these are all of the planting entries related to hotbeds. So you can see, for example, that I planted all the salads that are going to go into my hotbed on the 2nd of December. And I'm planning to fill the hotbeds with manure on the 17th of January. I'm going to plant Amsterdam forcing sprint carrots on the 8th of February. And then later on in the year, I'm going to plant some courgettes, and then even later on in April, I'm going to plant butternut squash, crown prince, and curry squash. And that 12th of April one will be when the coldframes have taken over, and I start to clear some space in the hotbeds. So that gives you an idea, and you can see that as you go into 2019, the same entries appear here. And as I said, the beauty of this is, if I find, for example, that 17th of January is a bit too early to fill the hotbeds with manure, I can just go in here, I can edit this entry, and I can say, well, actually, let's make it not annually on the 17th. Let's make it annually on, say, the 26th or something like that. And I can just change that entry, and then all subsequent entries are all sorted out. So that is, in a nutshell, how I'm doing it. Now, I'll also just show you very quickly that there are other ways to visualize all of this. So let's get out of search. And you can also look at it as a schedule, which I particularly like. So this is, you could print this out and it'll show you exactly what you're doing every day. And if you use this part of the description here, under lights, plant 1 per hotbed segment, sort of thing. That tells you basically the instructions as to what you're meant to be doing. And that, the bold part is the title, and the non-bolded part is the information that's in that location field, which, as I mentioned, is perfect for doing the searching. Now, I use Google Calendar for my standard calendar, of course, and so I can just click Steve Richards here, that's my calendar, and now other things like the date of the farmer's market and when the kids are on holiday and all of that sort of thing also pops in to into my calendar. So I can have one calendar that keeps track of everything, and I can update it anywhere. So when I'm down the allotment, if I think of something or want to change something, I can just pull up the calendar on my phone, change it, and then that's available everywhere. So there you go. Now the other thing is that I'm going to make this calendar available so that anybody can take a look at it. And in fact, you can use two things. You can just browse the calendar, or you can kind of subscribe to it and use it as your calendar, but a little bit entries will appear in your calendar. That's probably not that useful because although there's lots of useful information in here, and I'm adding additional useful information as quickly as I can, not everybody is going to have the ability to start things under lights like I do in the garage, bring things on in the conservatory, plant stuff in a hotbed and coldframes and mini hoop tunnels and things like that. And I don't have a big polytunnel, so that would change some of the dates. And obviously, if you're only just planting in the ground, that would radically change all of the dates. So these dates are very kind of specific to me, but it might be interesting to take a look. So the third thing that I do is plan where things are actually going to be planted. And we've got 3 plots and we plan those quite differently. So on my plot, the way that I do the planting is quite flexible because a lot of where I plant things depends on where space comes free. And that depends on how well things grow. So for example, if I get some lettuces and they get caterpillars, and so the hearts might be eaten out of by the caterpillars, in which case I'll just pull that crop out early and I'll just take something from the greenhouse and just plant it. And I've always got loads of spare things waiting in the greenhouse for planting. Some of those just get composted because seeds are free effectively nowadays, and some of them obviously do end up in the ground. And so I'm just really flexible. Crops succeed and last longer than you've expected them to. You don't use, say, radishes, you don't pull as many radishes as you expected, and so they last longer than you expected. Or the wood lice get the radishes, which happened to me this year, and so you end up, having to pull those radishes because they're no use, or radishes go woody or whatever. So, things are always going wrong when you're growing, and so basically you just have a surplus. You always have well, in my case, I always have a surplus. I've always got way more than I need. Give the surplus away. But it always means that we never go short. We've always got spare stuff to plant, and basically we just opportunistically plant whenever we've got space. And occasionally we'll pull something out because we know, timing-wise, that thing needs to be planted. So there you go. So let's have a look on Debbie's plot. We kind of manage in a similar sort of fashion. So really the big planning is on Jenny's plot, and I'll show you why. So on Jenny's plot, we use PowerPoint. And the reason we do that is because I know how to use PowerPoint. I've spent 20 odd years using it at work. But also I've tried the fancy planning tools that you can subscribe to. And to be honest, they're just too complicated or they're too inflexible. What do I like about PowerPoint? I like the fact that I've got this overview down here of each of the seasons. So I'm starting with winter 2017 and then spring 2018 and then summer 2018 and then autumn 2018. And this goes on all the way through to 2020. And I've color-coded things. So legumes are this light green, brassicas are the dark green, squashes are this orangey colour, and alliums are white. And any other things that I just chuck in, like chard and carrots and things are red. So I can just see at a glance where things are going and where things are going to be over time. I can add additional notes and things like that. I can easily move things around. I can cut and paste from one year to the next. It's just really simple and flexible. And it's really easy to print out, so I know what's going on. So basically, this is what I've currently got planted, and as you can see, I've got a huge amount of ground that is currently empty, to my shame. But in spring, it all gets filled up. So that's my spring planting, and then in summer, it just evolves as expected. So in autumn, rather than having loads of stuff, loads of ground empty, as you can see, in winter 2018, I'm planning to have every area of the plot planted up. So that's how I do it, and it makes planning successions really easy and really easy to visualize, and it's also really easy to visualize my rotations. So I'm really happy with it so far, although I've not actually used it for a full year, so it's just speculative as to how well this works, but I'm kind of hopeful that it'll work quite well. And also it's really easy to just keep a copy of this on my phone. So that is basically it. That is how I'm doing my planning for next year. So I hope you found that useful. You'll see a lot of this in action over the next few weeks, because this is a big time for me. I'm starting to aggressively start my seedlings in under grow lights, and then once they've germinated and are moving on a bit, I move them to conservatory, just because I run out of space in the garage under grow lights, and then I'll move them to my little greenhouse on the allotment, and then they'll go into the coldframes or whatever. And so with that, I will say goodbye, and I'll see you soon. So if you're interested in finding out how this planting schedule actually translates into the real world, then consider subscribing. And if you think other people might find this interesting, give it a like and share it. Okay, I will see you soon.